Hello everybody, welcome to Lynn's Library. Today we've got a dark one, but you know what? It's the last of the full Dark No Stars anthology, so thank God we can get on to some more pleasant things. You know what I mean? Like we can get away from murder and psychopaths and greed and hate. We can get away from that for a little while, but we're gonna finish on a really dark note. I've told you about the anthology by Stephen King, Full Dark No Stars. Well, the last novella in there is called A Good Marriage. Now, when I first read it, when the book first came out, I liked it. I didn't think there was much substance to it, but the ending, just like everything in Full Dark No Stars, was really dark, and it made my heart jump, and it made me feel real fucking yucky. And it's right at the end too. So you're reading it, it's fucked up, it's fucked up, it's fucked up. And then right at the last 2.5 pages, it's like, oh, fuck, all right, fuck. Like, it's fucking horrible. And like I said before, Stephen King did that on purpose with this book. That is the theme. You know, the darkness and you know, there's no way out for some of these people. They're just fucking bad. So A Good Marriage is about a woman named Darcy. She's been married to this guy for fucking, what is it, like 20 years? One day, he's away on a road trip, you know, and we get, just before we get into it, we get like a little insight into Darcy and Bob. Okay, so the husband is Bob, Darcy, their kids are all grown up and moved out of the house, and she's got a good life. Like, he's out on the road a lot, he's got a coin collection, you know, he works really hard, and he's just a really gentle, really just normal, super normal, gentle guy. Like, maybe even too chilled. Just like, they know each other so well. And that's why it's called A Good Marriage. Like, the first sentence is like, if anybody had to ask Darcy, like, how's your marriage? She would have said, it's a good marriage. And then this one day, she needs some batteries. She goes out into Bob's shed and she trips over a box. Now, this box shouldn't have been poking out. I reckon that's a bit too convenient, but we'll get to that. So this box, she kicks it. And then a corner of the box sort of opens a bit. She looks down. She normally would have just pushed her foot back and pushed that box back under. But she looks in it. And firstly, she finds in it some porno mags. And it's like, okay, so your husband's got porno mags. And, you know, he's not that kind of guy. She wouldn't have thought he was that kind of guy. But, you know, she's a dutiful wife. And she thinks, well, fuck, you know, talking to herself, come on, Darcy, just put it back in. Don't embarrass Bob. Like, he's got some porn. It's just, you know, sexual, like, you know, curiosity on his part. Obviously, that's why he's ordered some magazines off the internet. And she looks in the box and she can't help herself. These magazines aren't your normal fucking Playboy or Fox or fucking, you know, slutty sluts. They're fucking bondage magazines, and they're real fucking dark ones, you know, ones that don't have barcodes on them, ones that don't have adverts for anything else, you know. They're just fucking, like, homemade, really fucking seedy ones, with women, like, tied up with masks on and screaming with blood on them, you know, while men torture them. I forget the name of it, but, like, it gets stuck in her head. She's like, what the fuck? Like, these are Bob's? Like, you know? And she's like, just stop there, Darcy. Like, don't keep looking in this box. But she can't help it. And she thinks, well, fuck, I have to now because I've moved some of the magazines. He might know unless I don't put them back properly. So she digs through it. And then at the very bottom of the box, no, that's right, she pushes it back and then she hears something drop. And she's like, she can't leave it alone. So she gets down there and she reaches her hand in and pulls this thing out. And it's another box. It's an old, like, cigar box that she got him. And in it are women's IDs and, like, blood donor cards. And there's, like, 3 of them in there. 3 different women with a blood donor card and ID, like, stuff, you know, identification cards. And straight away, the first name of the woman on the blood donor card rings a bell. And she thinks, where the fuck have I heard that name? It's all over the news. There is this prolific serial killer out there, and he calls himself Beatty. And, you know, the police have never been able to catch him. And it's been on the news and in the newspapers and on the internet for fucking years and years and years. He's been doing this for a long time. Beatty is like, you know, he's not an urban legend. These women did exist, and they had their houses broken into, and Beatty raped and horribly murdered them, cut off heads and did all sorts of stuff. Now, she only kind of knows this briefly, but everybody kind of has seen it on the news. And she thinks, what the fuck? Now, straight away, she also remembers something that Beatty does, that the newspapers always say. Beatty waits a few weeks and then sends, like, the woman who was just murdered, her identification stuff to the local police, or whatever police he wants to send them to, and taunts the police, saying, ha ha ha, Beatty's back, you know, I killed another one, fucking, you know, like a real fucking, who used to do that? David Berkowitz? You know, like Jack the Ripper kind of shit. And these women were horribly tortured and horribly murdered. And it's been going on for years and years and years. And she can't help but think, like, fuck. Bob can't be Beatty. Wait, what? And now we start to get insights of her and Bob, and like how there's no way it could be. But she can't help it. He's on a road trip. And all of a sudden the phone rings. And it's Bob. And he always rings at this time, and they always just do their normal marriage talk, you know, husband and wife talk, and they chat to each other about this, that, and, you know, and they've got their same little quirks and what they know about each other, and she's like, oh, hey, and straight away she's like, she just thinks, like, survival way, like, I can't sort of let him hear that I'm terrified in my voice. You know, I need to think about this before I do anything, like, but he's rang, so she's got to pretend on the phone, but she pretends a bit too hard. And he's like, are you alright, honey? You've got like a funny sound in your voice. So she makes up that she was upset about something else. And he's like, oh, okay, well, you know, rah. And he's like, love you. And she gets off the phone. And he's like, how about I come back and see you? Like, I can make it back in a few hours. And she's like, no. Just, you know, fucking, if you come back here, I'll kick you right where it fucking hurts. Because, you know, you need to do this job. You know, they hadn't sent someone else out there. All that bullshit. Like, and she does it quite well for someone who's just come across what she's come across. And then she hangs up the phone. Then she can't help her. She jumps on the internet and she starts searching up the serial killer named Beatty. And this bit's cool because we get dates, we get like what happened to these women, and then she starts going through her receipt books to find out if Bob was on the road while these Beatty murders took place. And it's not looking good. They're all matching up. He's on the road at this time. He was right around the corner of that little town when that woman was abducted. He's fucking, Bob is Beatty. Her husband is this serial killer rapist, like fucking just as bad as Ted Bundy. And she's up all night, and she just has to pass out. So he won't be back home until the next night. So she goes to sleep, and then it stops there. And then the next part of the book, like she's got this cat scratching her cheek, and she's like, And she wakes up, and Bob's sitting right on the edge of the bed. He drove all night as soon as he hung up the phone just to get back because he knew that she found his stuff, and he starts trying to explain it to her like a good husband does. He's like, listen, I know you found my stuff. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about, like fucking around. And he's like, come on. Like, so, hey, if you want to go to the police, we'll go to the police right now. I knew you'd have to find out eventually. I just didn't want you to, but there's not like I'm going to run around. I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to fucking hurt you. I did kill all those women, yes. And if you want to go to the police, we'll go right now. But think of the kids, he reckons. Think of the children. Think about what they'd say. Now that you know, you might be an accomplice. And I don't want to put that kind of pressure on you. All of a sudden, he turns into this maniac. Now, this is interesting, but I like this. Okay, so he explains to her that when he was a kid, he had a best friend whose initials were BD. Beatty. Now, when they were kids in high school, like, girls used to fucking give him shit, and they were nerds, and rah-rah, and they actually wrote this plan, very Columbine-esque, to bring guns to school, lock themselves into the school, kill a certain amount of teachers, and then rape and murder all the girls that were fucking being horrible to them, all, you know, in their school life. It was Beatty's idea, he reckons, Bob reckons, and, but then Beatty was hit by a car as a teenager, and he died. That was Bob's best friend who died. He was hit by a car. And then about 10 years later, Bob says to Darcy that, like, 10 years later, Beatty possessed me. He came back and started telling me all this stuff that we have to do. He'd point women out and say, you have to kill her, you have to fuck her, you have to cut her up. You know what I mean? And, like, Bob would be like, oh, I don't want to do that, you know what I mean? But Beatty made me. And this is him telling his wife, Beatty made me do it. And, like, And he's like trying to be as honest as he can. Like, no, I mean it. Like, it was never me. I don't even remember the details because Beatty's ghost possessed me. He's a ghost of my dead friend possessing me to rape and kill. Now, Stephen King stories are supernatural a lot of the times, and stuff like that would work in a supernatural Stephen King book. But straight away, Darcy sees that he's lying. He likes to rape and kill, and we can pick up on that too when we're reading the fucking book. We know that it's bullshit, which I'm happy about. I didn't want it to be a supernatural bullshit split personality thing. He's a fucking liar, and he's a sick, filthy fucking murderer who's always lied to her. And apparently there's this bit where one of the women he killed, the little boy, she had a little boy, and he comes home from school early because he was sent home sick and surprises Beatty mid-rape murder. And the kid was also killed. But Beatty, when he wrote to the police, oh, and the little boy didn't suffer. It was an accident that he showed up. You know what I mean? I don't do that. And he's this Bob guy is trying to explain to Darcy, like, no, it's all Beatty. It's not me. Like, none of this interests me. Like, fuck that, you know? Like, I'm your husband. I love you. It's all Beatty. And but that's what I love about it. Like, it's not fucking Beatty. Beatty might have been a sicko too. But Bob just kept it in his head, and that's what he wants to do. And he's a fucking sick fuck, and he fucking murders women, and he can't help it because he's a fucking piece of shit. So now that she knows, she has to sit on it. She waits, and she doesn't know what to do. And she convinces him that, yeah, you know what? If you drop it right now, and you promise me to not send the rest of those women's IDs to the police, we can forget about it. I don't want the kids dragged into this. And he believes her. And they live their lives, but not for a long time. So it doesn't take long. I reckon it's only like a few months, maybe 6 months. She can't. It's like sleeping with a big fucking scary spider next to her. She can't get over it, but she can pretend really well. And she's thinking like, nah, he'll be onto me. He'll know that I'm fucking faking this. But then the darker part of her tells herself that, well, he lied to you for this long. See if you can do it to him. See how good you are. Now, there's this cool bit in this story where she always looks in the mirror. And as a little girl, Darcy used to look in the mirror like this. And her mum would be like, what are you doing, Darcy? Like, what are you looking for? And she'd always think in her head that in the mirror, it wasn't just reflecting glass. There's a whole nother world there. That's the mirror girl in there. And she's a darker mirror girl. And everything is backwards over there. Every door leads into a different spot. And if I could just get through that mirror and open that door, there's a whole nother world, and it's the opposite. So if I'm good, that's the dark Darcy. Ever since this happened, her finding out that her husband's a fucking serial killer, Darcy is certain that the mirror has now switched, and she's living in the mirror world, and now she's dark Darcy. So she's always looking in the mirror, obsessed with it for a few months. I'm not going to totally give away the ending on this one because it's a really fucking good one. So yeah, I won't go right into how it ends, but she fucking thinks up something really cool to do to him, and she does it. Now, that's enough of that because I want you to read it. Now, there is a conversation at the very end of this book. It's like 2 pages at the end, just kind of like Big Driver from Full Dark No Stars as well. The last couple of pages are like this conversation. And you get a lot of detail. And then there's a bit that just fucking gets you like, oh man, that is so dark. That is fuck. That will give me fucking nightmares I could have done without reading that. This one's the same. A Good Marriage is the same. In the last 2 pages, the detective comes around to her house. And he's been following Beatty for fucking 20 years. He's retired. And they have a conversation. And he says this one thing right towards the end of the book. And it's like, it's so fucking heavy. It's like, fuck. And like, you know, I didn't even see it coming, but it's so fucking heavy and it's fucking disgusting. But it fits in the story. If you weren't already feeling dark, you will after reading that sentence. But it's really well written. And it's what made the story for me. Even though I fucking wish I hadn't read it. It's like, fuck, man. That is some serious fucking horror. And it's not. It's a psychological thriller. But that is some serious, dark fucking thriller shit. And there's cool, like the detective reminds me of the detective from The Exorcist, the original Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. Which is just awesome. And that's it. One other note on this. Don't watch the movie. It's fucking dog shit. I know I said don't watch the movie Big Driver because it's like pretty average. The movie A Good Marriage, oh my god, man. Like, you heard what I just said to you about, like, this book. It is fucking dark and heavy, man. Like, and they made a movie and it was like, meh. But what's the point of making a fucking movie about something so R-rated and so horrifying if you're just gonna make it into a PG fucking, oh yeah, like, oh, my husband's a killer. It's like, fuck, man. Lifetime, fuck off. Anyway, I recommend reading it. And I recommend, as a whole, pick up Full Dark, No Stars by Stephen King. Because it is themed together like that. Now, I wanted to say this too. Stephen King has always released books that have 4 short novels in them. 4 Past Midnight, different seasons, you know, and he's got a couple more. If It Bleeds, his later one. But Full Dark, No Stars is so themed that the stories have their own individual, you know, they're their own individual stories. You could buy them in a little paperback on their own. But the way he's formatted them in this book, they don't seem to have that much individuality to them. It seems like one whole book. When I think of Big Driver, I think of the book, Full Dark, No Stars. When I think of A Good Marriage or 1922, I think of the book, the collection, Full Dark, No Stars. When I think of Apt Pupil or The Body or Shawshank Redemption, I don't really think of different seasons. I think of them as standalone novels, novellas. Full Dark, No Stars is a bit different. It's like they're really, really themed and put together like that. So that's it. Go out and get that book. Full Dark, No Stars is a killer. And like I said, like there's 3 movies made out of the 4 stories. Stephen King just can't escape that shit. Read some great books. Watch some even better fucking movies and don't take any shit from anyone.